Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, folks, we've all seen the devastation in Los Angeles due to the ongoing wildfires that have burned more than 40,000 acres of land this last week and have destroyed more than 12,000 structures and has led to more than 24 lives being lost. The fires are now the most destructive natural disasters in Los Angeles history. And despite the misinformation that's circulating here in the Capitol, in Southern California, and everywhere in between, it's clear that these fires only reach the size and the scale that they have because of unseasonably dry vegetation and extremely high winds, both of which are a direct result of climate change. Mr. Wright, thank you for being here. But as we've seen last week, the climate crisis and its deadly effects is very real to my neighbors and my constituents. As we discussed in our meeting yesterday, you were a longtime resident of California, so you've seen the conditions evolve firsthand. So I gotta tell, I was pretty disappointed to come across some social media posts of yours, and I will quote, understand you've written that the hype over wildfires is just hype to justify more impoverishment from bad government policies, end quote. Given the devastation that we're currently experiencing in Los Angeles, do you still believe that wildfires are just hype?
Sir, it is with great sorrow and fear that I watch what's happening in your city of LA and
do you think it's just hype or not?
Climate change is a real and global phenomenon.
Is it hype or not?
I stand by my past comments.
So you believe it's hype, you know?
Climate change is a real...
Tell that to the families of the more than 24 lost in these fires and counting, because the urban search and rescue teams are still going property by property with cadaver dogs. That number is going to climb. I'm disappointed, Mr. Wright. Let me make reference to another element of your social media. You reposted a statement, so not your words, but you felt it important enough to amplify a social media post, and I'll quote, "Now, obviously, burning to death in a fire is pretty grim, but that is not what is happening like the climate zealots would like you to believe," end quote. So again, to the families of more than a couple of dozen of my constituents who have died in these fires, and that number is growing, like I mentioned, do you believe that Californians who have died over the past week are somehow just a figment of our imagination?
Of course not, Senator. It is heart-wrenching to watch the destruction, most importantly, of people's lives.
And I'm not sorry for cutting you off here. I think the point has been made, and you're standing by your posts, and I assume the reposts as well. And I'll tell you why I'm further disappointed. We had, I think, a genuine conversation yesterday in my office. You said you have a science background. You pride yourself in leaning on facts and truth and evidence and data as you make decisions and decide which actions to take. So let me actually transition to something that's very substantive in this role, should you be fortunate enough to be confirmed. One of the most important functions of the Department of Energy is research. We've discussed the 17 national labs, and you referenced it earlier in your testimony, that are working hard to tackle critical scientific challenges. California is home to 3 of these labs, and we understand the need for these labs to advance our research and our knowledge. The data and research published by these labs and the department writ large are foundational for unlocking new technologies and maintaining our competitive advantages globally. Will you commit to publishing and not censoring non-classified Department of Energy research?
Absolutely, Senator. The scientific process has been a key driver of our progress, of our country, and of our world.
And let me tell you why I feel the need to even ask the question. It should be a no-brainer. Because it is a very real possibility that you may be asked by incoming President Trump, maybe through one of his intermediaries, to not publish or to withhold or otherwise suppress DOE research and studies. What would you do if asked?
I'm very proud to be serving, I hope, if I have the privilege to be confirmed, with incoming President Trump. He shares my passion for energy and for bettering American lives.
If asked, what would you do?
I will follow the scientific method. I will be honest and integrity and follow the laws and statutes of our country. Of course I will, Senator.
One other question, my very little time remaining, and I'll just sort of cut to the chase. In my office, you shared with me your opinion that federal subsidies do not make sense for mature industries, correct?
Less fruitful there, yes.
And you included oil and gas in the examples of mature industries, correct?
Correct.
So please share with me, with my colleagues on this committee, expand on your belief that if oil and gas are truly mature industries, then subsidies don't make sense here anymore, and we should retract those subsidies and maybe redirect those into smarter, more contemporary investments.
Yeah, as a career entrepreneur, a free market advocate, my goal is to have a small role for government in business, particularly in mature businesses, just as I discussed. You have to have the rule of law, you have to have the enforcement of contracts, but the best role for the federal government is basic research and helping launch new technologies that are just getting their footing.
So I take that as a supportive position of rolling back subsidies for oil and gas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are in the presence of greatness as we have Senator Risch, who's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. He's got another cabinet nominee with Senator Rubio.
Mr. Chairman, and I'll just follow up Senator Cruz's final comment with suggesting that we include targeting those children who are victims of unscrupulous employers as well. And happy to follow up with articles and reports as you prepare for this position.
Senator, I'm sorry, employers?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, many employers across the country who are employing and exploiting dangerous conditions.
Yes.
These children that we're talking about. Ms. Bondi, we have even less time in this round than the first round.
Oh, darn.
And I don't have some yes or no questions, but a couple of important issues I do want to make sure to cover for the record. When you were a Florida Attorney General, you defended restrictive abortion laws, including mandatory waiting periods and parental consent requirements. If confirmed as Attorney General, would you advocate for similar restrictions at the federal level?
I will follow the law of the United States of America.
Okay, well, I'm asking this question because there's a difference between federal law and Florida law. There's a difference between the law and your personal views. So how
And according
would you
to Dobbs, those are left to the states.
How would you ensure that your personal views don't influence your decisions as Attorney General in cases involving reproductive health?
Oh, my personal, no, my personal feelings would not influence, Senator.
Okay. Next, questions on the topic of gun violence, which continues to be a challenge and a problem in many parts of the country. As you know, the Department of Justice plays a key role in enforcing federal gun laws and working to prevent gun violence. In the wake of the Parkland shooting in 2018, you expressed support for certain gun control measures in Florida, including raising the minimum age for firearm purchases and implementing red flag laws, which I agree with, I support, and they're proven to make a difference and to save lives. How would you use the position of Attorney General to advance these common sense gun safety policies on a national level?
First, Senator, let me say I am pro-Second Amendment. I have always been pro-Second Amendment. I will follow the laws of my state of Florida and our country, of course, regarding any gun laws. I worked that shooting, meaning I was there when 17 family members were notified, I was there, that their children were murdered. Also Pulse nightclub. I also went to Nevada to help with the MGM shooting. The Attorney General at the time asked me to come out there. I believe over 60 people were murdered there. I am an advocate for the Second Amendment, but I will enforce the laws of the land.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I would certainly hope so. But any specific ideas that you have on advancing the common sense gun safety proposals that you support as you were Attorney General? I gave you 2 examples: raising the minimum age for firearm purchases or implementing red flag laws. There's, I think, a growing national consensus on universal background checks.
I would be glad to meet with you and review any legislation that you have, Senator.
Okay. All right, I only have a few seconds left, but thank you for your testimony. I know we asked some tough questions in this hearing. That's what the confirmation hearing process is supposed to be about. I know how to count, and I know how to read tea leaves. It seems to me you're very, 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 very likely to be confirmed, and certainly look forward to working with you in your office on the issues that I've raised today and more. And I certainly look forward to seeing you demonstrate the independence and respect for the rule of law that you have suggested to the committee today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and my prayers are with you in California again on the horrific fires and what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Combat them.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're so pleased that we're about to the end.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governor, good to see you again. Appreciate the time in my office a few weeks back, and greetings to your wife, Catherine. We can't do the jobs that we do without the support and love of our spouses. My time is limited. I'm not sure if we have a second round. There's a number of issues that I'm going to try to get to. If I don't, I'll be submitting questions for the records. Issues like tribal sovereignty that's come up before, and your thoughts on our trust and treaty obligations as a country. Public lands, we've had some recent progress and exciting announcements in California that we'd like to continue to build on and not go backwards on. Try to get to some water system. But let me begin with some of the more urgent questions and issues. In California, Los Angeles specifically, as we've all seen the devastation of recent fires in Southern California. As we speak here today, more than 40,000 acres burned, 12,000 structures plus destroyed, more than 24 people who have perished. That number is probably going to grow. It's clear it's been one of the most destructive natural disasters in Los Angeles history. As governor, you had an experience, not at this scale, but in 2024, you requested a major disaster declaration to assist in the recovery from the historic wildfires that ravaged across northwest North Dakota. And President Biden, as I understand, approved it quickly and without conditions. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do you believe federal disaster aid should come with or without conditions?
Well, I think it's each situation would vary. But first of all, let me just say that I want to extend, on behalf of Catherine and I, our empathy and sympathy to anybody that's lost their home, lost their lives, lost a loved one. We've got friends that have lived in the area that have lost their homes, homes they raised their kids in for 30 years, every piece of memorabilia and memory that they had gone, only getting out with a shirt on their back and talking to those individuals directly. And as it happens, our daughter was in LA for an event. The event was canceled. Catherine had flown out there, so both of them also had to evacuate as the fires were encroaching in that part of the city. So our family, part of our family saw it firsthand. And again, it's just urban wildfire is something that we, as a country, we need to think. And I say each situation is different because where you talked about in North Dakota was largely rural, largely grasslands.
And I'll
very,
get to that
very
because we've
different.
experienced both. But please extend my offer to support, assist in any way, any of my constituents that are friends or relatives of your family. For the record, there's never been strings attached to disaster relief. And I certainly hope this is not the first case. So I would ask as this plays out in Congress over the next several months, if you're fortunate enough to be confirmed as Interior Secretary, you wouldn't be the one deciding on whether or not to grant disaster declarations, but the department is significant, particularly when it comes to wildfire response. Would you commit to responding to every disaster with as much support and resources possible, regardless of which state or jurisdiction the disaster is in?
Well, absolutely, but I would say I would go a step further, which is we've got to commit to, and maybe it's going to take, apparently the fire in Maui wasn't big enough, in a sense. I mean, that was horrible, 100+ lives lost, the devastation that's there, but it didn't create a response nationally or at the federal level or a collaboration of states. But with this incredible, the largest ever, and when the dollars come up, this could be the most expensive wildfire, urban wildfire in the history of the country. It's probably a time for all of us together to say, what could we be doing differently? And I'm excited that Tim Sheehy is a new senator. He's the first that I know of who's actually worked as a professional firefighter on wildfire. I know that he and others are willing to work across the aisle to come up with solutions.
And Senator Sheehan and I are already working on some proposals on a bipartisan basis to improve the federal government's ability to help in situations like these.
And if I could, Senator, I would say we also have to look, it goes back to actually the grid, because if you a wildfire, whether it's in North Dakota, California, you need three things. You need oxygen, you need fuel load, and you need a spark. And in both cases, in North Dakota and in whatever, when you have high winds, those sparks can come from above ground power lines coming in contact with vegetation. And so we have to think about the grid.
I love that you have that
lines.
Appreciation and knowledge, and unfortunately the experience, because red flag conditions is something new to people across the country, but nothing new for those of us in the very dry West. My time is running quickly. I want to get at least one other issue in on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Vogt, thank you for being here. I can't help but notice how many times I've heard throughout the hearing today your argument that the Impoundment Control Act is unconstitutional. But the fact that the incoming general counsel at OMB, along with you, in your final days of the first Trump administration, specifically requested legislative adjustments to the Impoundment Control Act. What that tells me is that you do, in fact, understand the constitutionality of this law as not just currently on the books, but upheld by the courts. In your testimony here today and through how you served in the first Trump administration, it also strikes me, you come across as someone who thinks they know better than Congress, better than this committee, and at times even better than the president during the first Trump administration. You testified last week that you've been thinking about returning to the OMB for the last 4 years, and I can only hope and pray that, should you be confirmed, that you would uphold the Constitution above all else. I mean, I normally think folks willing to put themselves out for a position in public service for their willingness, because it's not easy. My colleague, Senator Lujan, raised some of your contributions to Project 2025. And in that Project 2025, you write that the OMB director should be, quote, aggressive in wielding the tool of apportionment on behalf of the president's agenda, and, quote, defend the apportionment power against attacks from Congress. It's particularly striking that there's so many members of this committee that seem eager, anxious, ready to vote for your confirmation when there's a clear disregard and disdain for Congress's appropriation authority. Frankly, Mr. Chairman, I know you're one of the appropriators. Wish you would join us and try to drive home this point, because it's setting the stage for how we will be working together over the next 4 years. I have to take this opportunity to echo Senator Peters, who raised a specific concern during your hearing in the Homeland Security Committee last week. outlining the fact that your record is particularly concerning for disaster-impacted states, given your previous unlawful actions to politicize, withhold, and slow the distribution of disaster or even foreign aid. So my question to you is this, Mr. Vogt: if confirmed, will you or will you not politicize disaster funding and deny funds provided by Congress for American families and businesses that have been devastated by natural disasters?
Senator, I would not politicize the dispersing of federal funds in any capacity.
Well, that's great to hear, because you say you're going to implement the president's agenda, and I've been paying very close to his remarks since the outset of the devastating fires in Southern California these last few weeks. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Vogt, will you commit to getting congressionally appropriated funding out to Californians devastated by these fires as quickly as possible?
Senator, this president has always been a firm distributor of federal resources to areas that need disaster money, and I don't expect that to change. And that's characterized my time at OMB the first time around. To your earlier question, I do support and will take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that will continue if confirmed in this capacity.
So two comments, just again for the record. Glad you're pledging to uphold the Constitution, because the Constitution and the law is clear as it pertains to the Impoundment Control Act. So unlike some of your clearly understood efforts in the first term, I hope you don't go back to those bad faith practices and efforts in the second term. And you're suggesting that you're not going to politicize the disbursement of funds, you're going to get them out the door as quickly as possible. Again, I would appreciate you living up to that commitment that you stated here today, because I continue to hear comments from President Trump, from leaders Republican leaders in Congress on both sides of the Capitol about attaching disaster funding to a debt limit vote, or attaching disaster funding to some other element of the new administration's agenda, whether it's tax breaks for billionaires, whether it's some unrelated issue in Northern California as it pertains to federal land management or anything else. So thank you for your comments on the record. I look forward to holding you to them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, after carefully evaluating Ms. Bondi's record and after her testimony before this committee, I continue to have significant reservations about her ability to serve as an independent Attorney General who will put her duty to the Constitution and to the American people above her loyalty to President Trump. So for that reason, I'm unable to support Ms. Bondi's nomination to serve as our nation's chief law enforcement officer. And I say this after recognizing, through the course of our private meeting in my office and through the course of her testimony during her confirmation here, that there were some glimmers of potential agreement in areas that I'd be hopeful to maybe agree and work together on, things like tackling the threat and the dangers of human trafficking, things like her positions on gun safety, building on some of the work in the state of Florida, where she served as Attorney General, that seemed to be common sense ideas that can and should be spread across the country. But instead of focusing on those, Ms. Bondi kept coming back to her unwillingness to answer some key questions. I remain deeply concerned about Ms. Bondi's willingness to go on national television and propagate lies about the results of a free and fair election, despite a total lack of evidence. I raised this during the hearing, colleagues, as you recall, not because they were political talking points that she was pushing that I might have happened to disagree with, but they were outright lies that pose a real threat to our democracy, a threat to voters, and a threat to the election workers who dedicate themselves to administering our elections. I was specific, repeatedly offering Ms. Bondi an opportunity to retract her statements during her confirmation hearing, and she continuously refused to state the simple fact that President Trump lost the state of Pennsylvania in 2020 and lost the election. And I remind us of this, colleagues, because it's important to remember that Ms. Bondi's associate at the time, in 2020, Rudy Giuliani, has been disbarred for spreading the same lies. Same lies, Mr. Giuliani disbarred, and it seems that now Republican senators are on the verge of confirming Ms. Bondi to serve as Attorney General of the United States, despite peddling the same lies and her unwillingness to retract them. That should have been the easy part, because no doubt Ms. Bondi will face far more daunting challenges as Attorney General to shield the department's work and professional civil servants from politicization and weaponization. And we've seen what's happened just in the last couple of days as evidence of what will continue to happen. It is not hypothetical. Look at the president's activity this last week alone. Despite some of my colleagues' assurances that he would refrain, President Trump has issued roughly 1,500 blanket pardons for January 6th insurrectionists and commuted the sentences of 14 of his supporters, including those convicted of violence against police officers. Trump's appointees then fired several career Department of Justice lawyers involved in investigating and prosecuting him for his role in the January 6th insurrection and for his improper handling of documents. And now the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia has already promised to investigate the prosecutors who helped put the violent January 6th insurrectionists behind bars. That's the environment that Pam Biondi is about to enter, a difficult environment for any attorney general to act independently. And I was particularly struck by the fact that despite practicing law for decades, 2 terms as Attorney General of the state of Florida, private practice experience, despite all that, Ms. Bondi claimed to be unfamiliar with the 14th Amendment and the citizenship clause within it. She and I discussed the very issue when we met one-on-one. It's clearly been in the news. And when given the opportunity to discuss it during the hearing, here in public, she refused to answer. Even worse, offensively, either claimed that she needed to study or telling me that she was not going to be doing my homework. Colleague, in that moment, I wasn't asking her to do my homework. I was asking her if she did hers. And now we know why she avoided the topic. Because just a couple weeks later, President Trump has issued a blatantly unconstitutional executive order seeking to strip birthright citizenship from Americans who were born here. The law is clear. The Constitution is clear. But what's increasingly clear is that when push comes to shove, Pam Bondi is not the kind of person who will defend the Constitution, defend the 14th Amendment, or defend Americans when the president instructs otherwise. The American people need and deserve to have faith that the Department of Justice enforces the law fairly, neutrally, and free from political interference. We need and deserve an Attorney General who will push back against illegal, immoral, and unethical requests. And unfortunately, I don't believe Ms. Bondi is up to the task. But with that being said, I do hope one thing, because she seems very likely to be confirmed. I hope she proves me wrong for the sake of our country and for the American people. I hope she proves me wrong, but today I cannot support her confirmation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, as we know, it's not just the nominee for FBI director that's before us today, but there's been a lot of chaos and confusion this week in regards to executive orders that have been issued as it pertains to the federal budget, federal spending, hiring freezes, et cetera. But relevant to this confirmation hearing, colleagues, the FBI has paused its new academy classes while they assess how the firing freeze impacts them. President Trump's executive orders has a national security exception, but it is unclear how it will apply to agencies like the FBI. The FBI has a large civilian employee population, so it's not certain if they will qualify for exceptions. The White House memo stated that nearly 1,000 probationary FBI employees would stay on only if, quote, justified, without clarity on a timetable or process for justification. Mr. Patel, how does this help or does this hurt the FBI improving public safety in America?
Senator, I know about as much of this late-breaking news as you do by reading it in the media, and I will say the following in terms of FBI employees, if I'm confirmed. FBI employees represent the front line of defense for national security and crime, and if I'm confirmed, I will ensure that all FBI graduates of the Academy will be protected and funded so that we can continue the fight together.
But would you agree that even just causing a pause or confusion in being able to grow the ranks is not helpful to public safety in America?
Not having a law enforcement there.
Thank you. 7 minutes goes by fast, so I want to get to as many topics as I can. As you know, the FBI plays a critical role in national security and public safety, yet the reports are that the hiring freezes is damaging. I want to submit for the record, Mr. Chairman, a New York Times article outlining the questions and concerns I just stated. Now, on to the next topic. FBI agents rely on their leadership to ensure their safety and success of operations. As Senior Director for Counterterrorism at the National Security Council, you were involved in a SEAL team rescue mission to recover a 27-year-old American hostage in Nigeria. According to former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, you falsely informed senior leadership that the United States had secured permission to fly over other nations' airspace en route to Nigeria. This misinformation forced the aircraft to circle the border for an additional hour, potentially jeopardizing the mission's success and putting service members at undue risk. Can you explain your decision to falsely claim airspace permissions had been secured for the mission?
I greatly appreciate this. This is one that hits home squarely because my guys, my friends, were on that operation. They were in that helo. They were in that V-22. And there's never a time in my career that it would jeopardize the safety of the men and women in uniform. And if you ask the National Security Advisor of the President of the United States, who's with me on that day, who has gone on the record publicly, as has General Tony Tata, who's the Undersecretary of Defense, they have both stated with affirmation that I acted appropriately, relayed all information accurately, and never jeopardized the safety of the hostages. And our men were on the ground for 59 seconds and executed 6 sentries and rescued an American hostage named Philip Walton, and he's home today with his family because of it.
So your friend's word versus the former Secretary of Defense. That's what we're going to be asked to consider. Next topic. In September of 2024, just a couple of months ago, you stated that Chris Wray was caught illegally using 702 collection against Americans 274,000 times. That's a quote. And you criticized Congress for failing to implement necessary reforms when reauthorizing Section 702. Now, earlier in this hearing, I heard you respond to Senator Cornyn's questions and saying that the improvements to FISA 702 accountability go a long way. That's what you said today. Earlier, on the record and under oath. But on that September podcast that I'm referring to, you said that by passing the reauthorization bill, Republicans, quote, bent the knee. So which is it? They bent the knee and didn't reform 702 as you would suggest, or that they've gone a long way?
Senator, as I've talked about extensively with my experience with 702, it is a necessary tool to protect this country. The FISA court themselves issued the report you're referring to about the illegal searches. They found 270-some thousand violations. So I think we need it, and I think we need to work with Congress to reform it.
Let me rephrase my question more bluntly. Which is your opinion on the most recent reauthorization of 702? That Republicans bent the knee for not insisting or adopting significant reforms, or that reforms have gone a long way? Because they seem like contradictory statements.
702 is a critical tool, and I'm proud of the reforms that have been implemented, and I'm proud to work with Congress moving forward to implement more reforms.
So they bent the knee, but now you're proud of it. Got it. Next topic. I know you've been asked about the J6 prison choir prior in this hearing. My question is not going to rehash previous questions. Funds have been raised, as you explained to me in our meeting last week, to support families of insurrectionists, my words clearly not yours, that have been in jail, including those who committed acts of violence against police officers. I want to know, in any of your work around the J6 prison choir, was any of the funds that were raised used to support the families of the police officers who were brutally attacked by the insurrectionists?
Senator, my foundation has used funds
Yes
to
or
help
no?
police
It's a yes or
officers
no.
across the country.
It's a yes or no.
I don't know if those officers' families applied for a grant. That's how we distribute at a charity, based on who comes
that
in.
tells me a lot about your care and prioritization of the police officers you claim to support, because
They've given away over $500,000 to law enforcement and
but
active
you
duty
can't
militaries.
articulate. I mean, you were able to articulate to me examples of the families of January 6th insurrectionists. Because the insurrectionists in
words, not
jail, you
mine.
supported the families, but you can't, say clearly and confidently that families of police officers who were brutally attacked got similar support. Next topic.
Your time's up.
Okay, I'll save it for the second round. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Before I call on Senator Schmidt, I have a letter that I want to put in regard to this Nigerian rescue story. It's from...
Chair, Mr. Patel, do you believe that background checks for firearm purchases are constitutional?
I don't know the in-depths of it, but I think that's what the Supreme Court has said, Senator.
So the word would be YES, yes. Can you say yes? Are background checks constitutional?
I can say whatever the Constitution and the Supreme Court ruled is the rule of the land.
And what is the law of the land at the moment?
I'm not an expert on state-by-state background checks.
You're going to be universal background checks. Well,
that's different.
I think actually your answer is pretty telling. Let me ask you another question. Do you believe that civilian ownership of machine guns are protected by the Second Amendment?
Universal background checks are different. That's not
I
what you
asked you a
say.
separate question. Do you believe civilian ownership of machine guns is protected by the Second Amendment?
Whatever the courts rule in regards to the Second Amendment is what is protected by the Second Amendment.
You had another telling response, colleagues, on another important issue. We've all talked, both sides of the aisle, about our concern about gun violence in America. I raise these questions because of an association I can observe between Mr. Patel and Gun Owners of America, a group staunchly opposed to firearm regulation, a group that Mr. Patel addressed in August, and a group that in December issued a press release applauding his nomination to be FBI director. Gun Owners of America has taken extreme positions, including the position that all background checks are unconstitutional, and that civilian ownership of machine guns is protected under the Second Amendment. Mr. Patel, let me remind you that as FBI director, you would oversee critical responsibilities related to firearm regulation, including administering the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Yes, it's constitutional. It's in place for a reason. You would also regulate the distribution of machine guns to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. Policies and programs in place for a reason. And given your hesitancy, given your answers, I'm concerned about your ability to do the job when it's not in alignment with groups like Gun Owners of America. Colleagues, we've been hearing a lot of partial responses and lack of recollections throughout the day, and I can't help but identify the pattern of Mr. Patel calling FBI leadership corrupt, labeling agents as gangsters, accusing them of being part of a criminal deep state conspiracy. We've heard of his experience with the J6 prison choir, a group of individuals convicted for their roles in the January 6th insurrection. We've heard his false claims that the U.S. had secured airspace permissions during a high-stakes SEAL team hostage rescue mission in Nigeria. I can go on and on. These positions are inconsistent with the role of FBI director, a position that demands independence, professionalism, and unwavering commitment to the rule of law. Mr. Patel, your loyalty to President Trump and the MAGA movement may score you points in some quarters, but they are certainly not the qualities necessary to serve as director of the FBI. And Mr. Chair, just in closing, I understand while I was out of the room earlier that Senator Tillis raised my name and attributed to a quote, bent the knee as part of my questioning earlier to me. And so for the record and for my colleague from North Carolina, I want to clarify that the bent the knee quote were not my words. I was quoting Mr. Patel as he appeared on the Sean Ryan show on September 2nd of 2024. And I'm happy to share a link, Senator Tillis, to clarify. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't want to belabor this, but it certainly would be.
Senator Padilla.
I think Alex.
Padilla? Yes, sir. You're up. Number.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I call up Padilla Amendment number 1. This amendment would create a new deficit-neutral reserve fund relating to prohibiting the detention and deportation of individuals who are not a threat to public safety, including dreamers who have not been convicted of a felony. Congressional Republicans and President Trump have previously expressed support for protecting dreamers from deportation. In fact, I'd like to recognize and thank the chairman for his longstanding leadership on the Bipartisan DREAM Act, which would allow those who were brought to the United States when they were very, very young to earn lawful permanent residence. Again, as long as they are not convicted of a felony or a threat to public safety. A reminder, folks, to be eligible for DACA in the first place, an individual cannot have been convicted of a felony offense, a significant misdemeanor offense, or multiple misdemeanor offenses, and cannot pose a threat to national security or public safety. Dreamers are Americans in every way except one, their immigration status. They have grown to become teachers, nurses, small business owners in our communities, but they live each day in fear of deportation. While we continue to work to modernize our immigration system, Congress must at the very least act now to give dreamers the stability they deserve. Again, President Trump and congressional Republicans have claimed they are focused on detaining and deporting only violent criminals. And I agree, that should be the focus and top priority. But that's not what's happening on the ground. Instead, the administration is going after people who pose no threat to public safety and is even stripping legal status from immigrants who came following the rules, like we saw with the president's recent revocation of temporary protected status for Venezuelans. So all I'm asking, colleagues, is that we recommit to the clear bipartisan belief that dreamers who have not been convicted of a felony and who pose no threat to public safety should be safe from deportation. I urge all my colleagues who have long advocated for this to also support this amendment.
Thank you. I appreciate your passion on the topic. I've tried to work with my Democratic colleagues to find a way forward on immigration. The Lake and Riley Act, we had very similar amendments there. What we're trying to do, at least what I'm trying to do, is salvage one day finding a solution to immigration after 4 years of complete disaster. I was told by everybody on the right, if you ever do immigration and they get in charge, they won't enforce the border no matter how you write it. Well, that narrative, unfortunately, has come true more than I would ever like to believe it would. So we got to change the narrative. I think President Trump has talked about doing something with the DACA population. Lake and Raleigh, we had a similar debate. And to my colleagues on this side, I think now is the time to focus on getting criminals and people who have come here illegally out, bring some order to chaos. And in my view, the whole immigration debate has been put back by years because of what we had for the last 4 years, and it does in many ways break my heart, but we are where we are. So I would respectfully oppose this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, no, I'm not alone in saying that it's extremely unfortunate where we find ourselves today. President Trump has made clear that the OMB's sole mission, at least as he wishes it under his administration, is to cut programs, the very programs that so many Americans rely on in order to pay for another massive round of tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. In fact, during his address to Congress just last night, he doubled down on DOJ's wildly unpopular agenda of chaos and corruption, proudly listing the ways he has and will continue to devastate communities. And today we're asked to consider the next nominee preparing to further eliminate funding and jobs from our constituents. Mr. Bishop, I'd like for you to speak to the Californians that I represent for a minute here. I want them to hear how you'll justify ripping away important services and programs while raising the cost of everything. That's the impact that we're seeing from this administration. My constituents deserve to know exactly who to thank for these reckless cuts. You know, in the last 6 weeks, that's all the time that it's taken for President Trump and the Office of Management and Budget to wreak havoc across critical government programs. During your confirmation hearing in the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee last week, I heard you insist multiple times that President Trump's firing of civil servants was not indiscriminate. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I continue to
So
hold
was
that
it
view.
not indiscriminate, or was it intentional when President Trump fired scientists fighting the bird flu outbreak while the cost of eggs continues to soar?
We'd have to look at the details of that, Senator. I'm not aware of the specific point you're making.
You're a smart man. You're a smart man. I know you've seen the details. Was it indiscriminate or intentional when President Trump fired military veterans operating the Veterans Crisis Line?
I'd have to look at the details of that, Senator. I don't, as I said, I'm.
Was it not indiscriminate, or was it intentional when President Trump fired thousands of seasonal employees at the National Park Service?
Yeah, I do not think that, and the dismissals that have occurred are indiscriminate.
I'm
Senator.
asking
That's
this question because you seem to be applauding Elon Musk's efforts and this DOJ strategy and chaos. So
I certainly am.
Was it not indiscriminate, or was it intentional when President Trump fired thousands of nuclear weapons safety and security workers at the National Nuclear Security Administration?
We'd have to look into the details of that, Senator. I'd be glad to do that. Get back to you.
All this is just disappointing. And to make matters worse, you know, in so many areas of these indiscriminate firings, they've had to scramble to hire them back shortly after they realize their colossal error. And I could go on and on with additional examples. But let's be clear, this is not a one-time adjustment, as Mr. Bishop has characterized it. So here's actually a real question, and I'm interested in your response. What corrective measures has OMB taken to undo and limit indiscriminate firings of federal employees by an unelected bureaucrat?
Well, I don't think any of the premise of the question is accurate, Senator. But of course, OMB is not the agency within the department or within the Executive Office of the President that deals with personnel. That's the that's a different office. And so And moreover, I'm not yet serving as deputy director and do not have management responsibility, nor am I aware of some of the details that you've made reference to. So I can't speak to the question
So
about whether
OMB's
what I-
involvement, Russell Vogt's involvement, the director now, there'll be evidence to the contrary of direct involvement in those personnel decisions. Maybe let me end with this, since I reference Director Vogt. When he was before this committee, one of the questions I asked is if he stood by his previous statements of a mission, a goal, an agenda to put federal employees into trauma. And there's example after example of exactly that happening given the activity of the last 6 weeks, and especially since Mr. Vogt was confirmed. Is that what you're signing up for, to help facilitate that, to help further that, putting federal employees into trauma?
You know, Senator, that comment in one of his writings that's been taken, or one of his speeches has been taken out of context.
It's pretty clear and direct.
No, it's been used in a misleading way. I've seen what he means is that federal employees, that the American people need federal employees to perform. That federal employees themselves on surveys.
How do they perform when they're in trauma? When they've been traumatized by their employer?
Yeah, well, I think that again, the answer is that federal employees, there must be change in the workplace. Federal employees are making the comment that they see underperformers continuously among their colleagues, that they cannot see, that the processes will not allow to be removed. Those are federal employees. I've seen the way Russ Vogt works with the people at OMB, the career officials there. He has extraordinary respect for their skill, and he expects them to perform, and they do.
Yeah, don't mistake their trauma for respect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Padilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Duffy, thank you for being here, and appreciated our productive and constructive dialogue by phone yesterday on some of the California transportation priorities that we've been discussing for a while. And I appreciate, Madam Chair, the opportunity to shed light on the bipartisan infrastructure law. It has meant more than $54 billion of investment in a number of projects throughout the state of California that not only help keep up with our transit needs, help keep modern and efficient some of the nation's busiest ports, and of course our extensive highway system. We're doing so to meet some deferred maintenance needs in some respects, but also making necessary improvements to accommodate both a growing population and a growing economy. So a lot of these projects have been a long time in coming, and we're finally glad to see the activity happening. But as we talked about yesterday, it's also critical that the administration support some key events that are drivers of goods movement, people movement, and are a catalyst for modernization. Specifically referring to the LA 28 Olympics to be hosted in Los Angeles, the most populous region in the country already. But add to that the anticipated 15 million ticket holders coming to events in 2028. So to make it successful and to lay the foundation for economic growth well beyond the Olympics, we're looking to partner with the Department of Transportation in a big, big way. 2028 seems like a long ways away, but it's actually just around the corner from a planning and preparation standpoint, and we need funding for those preparations now. And I think it'd be helpful to have a designated line item in the president's budget to help us prepare not only for LA 28, by the way, but also to lay the foundation for the 2034 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. So long an intro to ask you what you might be able to provide in terms of an update on your work to support the Olympics in 2028, including any work with the OMB to develop funding proposals for the Olympics.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Senator. And again, it is the Olympics that are going to be hosted in LA, but in America. And so there's a task force in this administration that we are part of, that I have designated someone to as we think through what should the administration be looking at, what are the needs of the greater LA area. As we, to your point, we're going to see a lot of people come into our country. We're going to move them. We have to house them. Again, that's a thoughtful process that we are engaging in right now. And I would agree with you. 3 years is right around the corner. It's not a lot of time. We have to move quickly.
Move them, house them, and help maintain safe and secure events around the Olympics. Question on a different topic. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act provided $8 billion in advance appropriations for the FTA's Capital Investment Grants Program, one of the items that we talked about yesterday, which helps fund large transit capital projects. Projects make their way through the pipeline after already rigorous review on their merit and their feasibility. And there's a number of critical projects in California making their way through the pipeline as we speak. But as you can imagine, there's some constituents, there's some transit agencies back home, some municipalities that are a little nervous about the reliability of that funding, given some of the changes and whiplash that we're experiencing here in Washington. As your team executes the program, can you assure us that the review process and just the awarding of funds going forward will continue to simply be based on merit?
Yes, Senator. And I think you might be also referring to the California high-speed rail project, which we are going to
one of a number, yes.
And per our conversation yesterday, our people have been in touch with the California Rail Authority, I believe is who that is. And but I do believe, as a philosophy, if we commit to rail, if we commit to infrastructure, we should actually build the infrastructure we commit to. And I know that this project you've laid out, there's distinct differences for the LA to San Francisco portion of this high-speed rail. But when we give timelines and projections of cost that we can't meet, and it's $33 billion now, it's going to be like $133 billion. There was time frames that were set by, it should be done by 2020. Now there's no time frame in which it's going to be completed. That's not your fault, Senator, but we have to actually deliver on projects for the people. And we don't have high-speed rail in America. If we want to have high-speed rail and you want to dedicate money to it, let's actually show America what high-speed rail looks like, because we built it. We didn't just spend money on a project, we built a project.
I respect that, Mr. Secretary, but to be clear, that's one of a number of projects I was making reference to. There's transit projects, including rail lines in and around San Diego, second largest city in California, still another one of the largest cities in America, in and around Los Angeles, second largest city in America, but the anchor for the most populous county in America, around the San Francisco Bay Area. So areas of significant economic contribution to the nation and our federal coffers that can continue to grow with the proper infrastructure investment. So wanted to keep those moving along. Look, my time is up. I may submit some questions for the record, but appreciate your attention and partnership.
Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I want to begin with a couple statements, not specific to the nominee before us, Mr. Bouvie, but general observations as we've had hearings of nominees and on issues since the beginning of the year. It's become clear that President Trump clearly has one litmus test when selecting people to appoint. It's not experience. It's not dedication to our country or the rule of law. It's whether or not a potential nominee is willing to bend or ignore the law to satisfy the president's whims. Now, I understand that elections have consequences, and one consequence is that a president who is elected will get to nominate judges for the duration of his term or her term. But selecting someone with such a deep track record of vindictive, duplicitous behavior, of abuse of power, that is and must be treated as unacceptable. From Mr. Bouvie's time with the Southern District of New York to his time representing Donald Trump to his time at the Trump Justice Department, it's been demonstrated that he will not let the law stand in the way of doing what he wants. That's why as soon as Mr. Bouvie joined the Justice Department in an acting, unconfirmed capacity, he began an effort to purge the Department of Justice of perceived, quote, enemies, like the January 6th prosecutors. He even called the January 6th prosecutions, quote, a grave national injustice. and ordered the FBI to produce a list of everyone involved in them. Never mind the fact that he had previously worked on January 6 prosecutions while at the Southern District of New York. And that's why he ordered Southern District of New York prosecutors to dismiss criminal charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams in exchange for Mayor Adams helping to implement President Trump's radical immigration enforcement plan. Mr. Boovy's actions in this case led 8 prosecutors, 8, including the interim U.S. Attorney, Danielle Sassoon, who had clerked for Justice Scalia, to resign. But instead of firing him, Donald Trump plans to give him a lifetime appointment to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in New Jersey, a state that Mr. Boovy has very, very little ties to. Now, it's not just Democrats who are concerned. Conservative judicial activist and former Republican staff member of this committee, Ed Wallen, who wrote that Boovy has been called, quote, a savage, and likened him to a, quote, mafia henchman. Not my words, just quoting what's been submitted to this committee for consideration. The Wall Street Journal published an editorial urging this committee to ask questions about Boovy's qualifications for this seat. They wrote, quote, does Emil Boovy have the right judicial temperament? Does he have a judicial philosophy? It's seemingly clear that the more we learn, the answer is no. But we're here to ask questions, and I do have a couple of questions in my time remaining. Mr. Boovy, can you share with us how many of the prosecutors assigned to the Capitol siege section were fired after you sent your memo on staffing at the Department of Justice?
I don't recall.
Ballpark?
I don't recall.
All right. Well, I'll submit that in the form of a question for the record to allow you time to jog your memory banks and try to give us a number or at least an estimate. Can you tell me how many January 6 rioters President Trump pardoned?
No, I don't recall.
Okay. Well, that actually kind of makes sense because I don't think when asked, the president himself couldn't give an exact number. When asked, his response was, quote, it would be very, very cumbersome to go and look. You know how many people we're talking about? 1,500 people. To think that on the first day in office, he would have considered case by case that volume of files to make the determination that they should be pardoned, that's clearly not believable. And we know that dozens of those pardoned had prior criminal records, including rape, sexual abuse of a minor, domestic violence, and more. Yes, I'm talking about the January 6 rioters. I'm going to end with this, Madam Chair. I can tell you that a long-serving prosecutor with the D.C. United States Attorney's Office thought that it sent a message that, quote, political violence toward a political goal is acceptable in a modern democratic society. Mr. Boovy, you contributed to these actions. What do you think what kind of message do you think this sends to the American people?
I think that the president, in his exclusive discretion under the Constitution.
My question is, what message does this send to the American people? The pardoning of January 6th rioters, many with prior criminal convictions.
And you can answer briefly.
I think that's a question that calls for political views, and under the canons, I'm not able to take a position.
I thought we were talking about public safety and the rule of law. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Schiff.
For the record. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the first things I want to clarify, something I keep hearing, not just during this hearing, but for months and months now from the Trump administration, is that they're going after the worst of the worst. That's the soundbite, that's the rhetoric. And their aggressive show of force is accomplishing the goal. At least that's their claim. The way they present it, the way they talk about President Biden's administration and prior Democratic administrations is like it was never a priority for Democratic administrations to go after criminals. and that Democrats and Democratic administrations just didn't care about the presence of dangerous people in our communities. It's simply not true. So I want to help set the record straight. And again, if you can't take my word for it, let's turn to an expert. Ms. Fleischaker, you were in ICE leadership. In your view, in your experience, did the Biden administration ever restrain ICE from pursuing serious criminals? Part B to that question, only because one of the other witnesses implied that the Biden administration was restraining ICE either by policy or by resources from doing its job. True or false? Can you expand on both of those, please?
We absolutely did not stop ICE agents from enforcing the law and going after public safety threats. In fact, we encouraged them to do so. We very much want to find and arrest public safety threats in the community.
Well, thank you for that. And anybody on this side of the dais who's familiar with the appropriations process in Congress, particularly in the Senate, given the filibuster rules, knows that spending plans are adopted on a bipartisan basis. On a bipartisan basis, so we can discuss and debate the need for additional investments in not just enforcement, but as I mentioned previously, immigration judges, hearing officers, et cetera. In fact, not too long ago, there was a bipartisan proposal on the table to significantly ramp up the budgets for those agencies, and Republicans walked away from that deal. That's a fact. Second area I want to tackle is in the area of indiscriminate enforcement. Just by show of hands, by the way, raise your hand if you think all immigrants are criminals. Let the record reflect none of the witnesses raised. All immigrants are criminals?
Not all immigrants.
I'm very precise in my question. Very precise in my question.
Repeat your question.
Raise your hand if you believe all immigrants are criminals.
Are you talking about legal immigrants or are you talking about regular immigrants? Exactly.
Microphone. Yeah, he's microphone.
All immigrants. I'm using my words very
Are you
precisely.
talking about
Raise your hand.
illegal immigrants
By show of
or
hands,
immigrants who came here legally and did it the right way? Which one?
By a show of hands, raise your
Well,
hand
that's
if you
not,
believe
yeah,
all
that's not going to
immigrants
be
are
a
criminals.
proper answer to that.
Or even most.
No,
Again,
all
those
illegal
hands are
immigrants
not-
are criminals because
So
they
I
came
don't
here
think anyone
illegally.
here would disagree with the idea of rooting out the, quote, worst of the worst, even if we disagree over what immigration policy should be. But I believe it's unacceptable that these raids are so indiscriminate that they end up sweeping up people with no history of violent crime. Hardworking people trying to give their children a better life, like Alejandro's father, Narciso. Now, Alejandro, question is for you. First of all, I'm so sorry about what happened to your father and what your family's been going through. Targeting somebody like him does not seem to make the community, the state of California, or the country any safer. And it's an insult to our history of welcoming people who want a better life. Now, I agree, we need to modernize our immigration system to make it more strategic, more effective. Is there anything else that you would like to share about the cruelty with which your father was treated or which your family's gone through?
I think that the way they treated him and the way they handled that situation was very unprofessional. It showed men who were not trained. It doesn't seem like it. They were running with fingers. They were running with guns in their hand, with fingers on the trigger, pointing it at civilian vehicles. And honestly, I don't think that's for the best of public safety. And I believe that they should have better training and go out and chase after the real criminals.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And the more resources, personnel, funding, and otherwise that's directed at, again, just broad-based enforcement is less focus, less prioritization of those violent criminals that we know are out there, the administration knows are out there, but they're not the clear priority or focus. If I may, Mr. Chairman, just one more question in this round. We know that the massive show of force by the Department of Homeland Security has scared people across communities, not just in Los Angeles, not just throughout my home state of California, but other parts of the country, to the point that we're now seeing people hesitate to go to work, hesitate to patronize stores and to visit public spaces, even go to church. So I'm deeply concerned that this fear will also deter people from reporting crimes like domestic violence, sexual assault, robbery, etc. Dr. Velis, you have 3 decades of experience encouraging community members to come out of the shadows and trust you and your officers to report crime, to engage in law enforcement, to improve public safety. You spoke to this a little bit during your opening statement, but can you describe the impact of these indiscriminate raids on the types of relationships that you trained your officers to build with immigrant communities?
Thank you, Senator Padilla, for the question. So under my leadership, Senator Padilla, we spent days, years, weeks. I spent 30 years building trust. Trust is the fulcrum to crime reduction, to the safety of community members, to the safety of police officers. This is an ongoing daily through every single interactions. When the community have the perception that we're involved in immigration enforcement, they are not going to come forward and report crimes. They're not going to come forward and access police services. Thus, what's going to happen is that will increase the percentage for this immigrant communities to be re-victimized by violent offenders. And once again, that will put greater risk for police officers. Community members are the ones who are home in their community 24/7. They are our eyes and ears when we respond and we try to reduce crime.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have additional questions. I'll wait for the next round.
Senator Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia is the largest U.S. Attorney's Office in the country. It has over 330 attorneys and 350 staff. The U.S. Attorney is responsible for thousands of criminal cases and thousands of civil cases, often extremely complicated ones. And who is before us for consideration to put in this position of overseeing the largest federal law enforcement office in the country? A television personality who hasn't litigated in more than 20 years. An attorney who is not admitted to the D.C. bar and who, before becoming interim U.S. attorney, had not practiced in federal court in the District of Columbia or elsewhere. These are serious law enforcement jobs. They're not patronage positions to be handed out to the president's unqualified friends and allies as a thank you for their loyalty. But it seems to be how this is being treated. Her lack of relevant experience doesn't even touch on Ms. Pirro's outrageously disqualifying past statements. And some of my colleagues have already hit on a lot of these, but I'll highlight just a few. She referred to the January 6th rioters who had been convicted as hostages and called for investigations into the January 6th prosecutors. As ranking member of the Rules Committee, I also have concerns about her work on the ongoing January 6th litigation. I remind my colleagues here that her predecessor, Ed Martin, argued that the federal government should refund restitution payments made by some of the convicted January 6 rioters. These refunds come straight from the money given to the architect of the Capitol for the nearly $3 million in damage that the insurrection has caused. She has publicly attacked members of this committee by name on multiple occasions, including calling one a, quote, demon rat. She's also attacked Republicans who dare speak out against Donald Trump. She has advocated for the arrest of FBI and DOJ investigators that she didn't agree with, saying that they should, quote, not just be fired, but taken out in handcuffs. She's been taken off the air by her own network for refusing to stop peddling lies about the 2020 election and for repeatedly making racist, Islamophobic comments, including about sitting members of Congress. Her personal involvement in Fox News' 2020 election coverage resulted in a $787.5 million settlement for defamation of Dominion voting systems as she lied about the security of our election systems. And after everything I have just described, which is just the tip of the iceberg of Ms. Pirro's record, I can't believe we're actually having a vote on the nomination. She may belong on Fox News, but she does not belong in a federal law enforcement role.
Senator Schiff and then Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator
Wonderful.
Padilla.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, I want to follow up on an issue and comments that were raised by Ranking Member Durbin, because I've had the opportunity to take a look at Mr. Tung's background. We've had an opportunity to have a conversation via Zoom. And I know he has strong views about how other people's families should function and what women should be allowed and not allowed to do. I'll quote from Mr. Tung's previous writings. He has criticized the so-called, quote, welfare state for the, quote, disillusion of the family, end quote. He has said he, quote, believes in emphasizing family and what it means for a woman to be a good wife and partner, end quote. He has said, and I find this reprehensible, that he, quote, believes in gender roles and that women are simply better than men at some things. When these radical feminists try to blur gender roles, they undermine institutions like marriage, institutions which hold society together, end quote. Mr. Tung, can you list for us the things that you believe are, quote, simply women are, quote, simply better at than men?
Senator, again, the comments you're referencing and captured by a Yale Daily News reporter were captured over 20 years ago when I was an undergraduate in college.
Yes, I understand that, but that was 2006, not 1956. Even the year 2006, I don't think the country's mood, let alone the law, was what you're suggesting here.
Senator, my wife is sitting behind me, and I can tell you that she is better at many things, and not just some things, than I am. She worked on the Hill, she worked in the White House, and she worked for a Fortune 1 company.
So then do you still believe that women should stay home and not go out into the workplace?
Senator, the suggestion that I think women should not be provided with the same professional opportunities as men is inaccurate.
So at what point in the last 20 years, not 50 or 60, just in the last 20 years, did your mind change on this?
Senator, my views on policy matters and sociological matters that you're referencing, again, are the subject of wide debate. And for that reason, as a nominee sitting here today before the committee, I cannot
But there's a couple of reasons that bring
candidates.
this up, and there are some other issues I want to get to. But first of all, I think for any person to come into a courtroom, they deserve to know that they're going to be given a fair trial, fair consideration in a proceeding. So given your very public past comments, not long ago history, relatively recent history, how should a woman be entering into your courtroom thinking they're going to get a fair shake if you won't even tell us when and how your mind was changed on this? And you've now referenced twice this concern about live issues. So what item is working its way through the judiciary that may well appear on the Ninth Circuit for you to consider and rule on?
Senator, every litigant who would come before my court, should I be so lucky to be confirmed as a judge, would be treated with, man or woman, would be treated with equality, dignity, and respect.
Well, that's why we're asking this question. But what are the live issues that you're referencing that keep you from answering Senator Durbin's questions and my questions?
Senator, matters of policy and of sociology.
What is the live issue you're referencing that's keeping you from answering Senator Durbin's question and my question?
Senator, I apologize. I'm not understanding the question.
Well, you are hiding behind a, quote, live issue concern for not answering Senator Durbin's question or my question.
Senator, the live issues that you're referencing are based on certain comments.
I want to know
that
what
I've
you're
made.
referencing.
Senator, the live issues that I'm referencing are matters of policy and sociology that impinge on gender-related issues.
So anything that could be a topic of conversation anywhere in the country at any time will keep you from answering our specific questions. Let me move on to one more item then. Because you've been a prolific writer, not just on your views about women, but on views on American workers. My colleague, Senator Schiff, raised an incident, a Labor Day protest that you were one of the leaders of you were president at the time for the Committee for Freedom. The protests in question, protesters there had a message, quote, "End mandatory maternity leave. It hurts women." Others held signs that said, "Workers of the world, get back to work." And Mr. Tung specifically wanted to tell the Yale campus that unionized labor hurts consumers. Mr. Tung, is this you holding a sign that says union no?
Senator, that is me from over 20 years ago when I was in college exercising my First Amendment rights.
Absolutely, and I defend your First Amendment rights, but I also defend labor rights and labor protections in this country. So just as I asked with women a few minutes ago, if a labor issue is before you, how can working men and women come into your courtroom and feel like they're going to get a fair shake given your clearly strong views, not in the long ago past, but in the relatively recent past?
Senator, when one puts on the robe, the person's role changes qualitatively. And I can assure this committee, and I commit to this committee, that if I were fortunate to be confirmed as a judge, I will evaluate each argument advanced by the parties respectfully, carefully, and with the scrutiny that it deserves.
Do you recant this and your other comments that I've cited here today?
Senator Brett.
Senator, again, live issues on policy, I cannot comment.
You do not recant.
Judicial
Thank you.
Mr. Tung, and thank you both for being here. I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about your wife again. I heard what you said about her. I know what it means to be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, glad to be on this committee and take our responsibility seriously to conduct oversight of the FBI, obviously one of the most critical law enforcement agencies in the country. As Senator Klobuchar and others on this committee have reminded us, the last several months have provided far too many reminders of the political violence crisis in America today and the gun violence crisis in America today, including the tragic killing just last week. Director Patel, this committee takes seriously its not just oversight role, but recognizing the FBI's important role in protecting the public from gun violence while respecting constitutional rights. If you recall, this was a significant subject area of my questioning during your confirmation hearing. The Bureau plays a central role in enforcing federal firearm laws, ensuring the accuracy of background checks, and monitoring trends like machine gun conversion devices and lost or stolen firearms. Now, during your confirmation hearing, you pledged that the FBI would enforce firearm laws fully and fairly, consistent with the Second Amendment. Yet we continue to see a sharp rise in lost and stolen firearms reported by federal licensees. Can you point to any measurable enforcement results like arrests, not just arrests, but also prosecutions or task force expansions since you became director?
I'll get those to you, Senator.
Nothing you can share here today?
No, I'll get the full list to you.
You came unprepared today to respond to questions which you knew were important going back to your confirmation hearing. Now, the Bureau has warned about the public safety threat posed by machine gun conversion devices, which convert semi-automatic weapons to automatic ones. Can you at least reference what resources you're dedicating to this threat?
Absolutely, Senator. Part of tracking ghost guns, as you alluded to, is having a sustainable database, which is hubbed out of our CJIS division in West Virginia. And we've allocated more resources so that FFLs can track and trace firearms that are stolen and make sure they don't get into the population. That's one of my primary concerns, that we don't want stolen weapons anywhere near anything.
But the numbers continue to go up as reported by federal licensees. Let me get to my next question on this topic. You previously stated that you hadn't reviewed Fix NICS, a federal law that improves reporting to the National Criminal Background Check System. 8 months into your job, what concrete steps have you taken to ensure that NICS records are complete, accurate, and timely?
That's actually a great question that we have dedicated a lot of resources to, again, at CJIS. The NICS system has been trying to get to 100% within 15 minutes. We are currently at 93%, with 87% of those being responsive in less than 60 seconds. So we got more
Do you
work to do.
think additional resources would be helpful in getting to 100%, or do you still argue that less resources are necessary to get from 93 to 100?
No, I just think we have to work on how fast our actual infrastructure processes these things.
On to a question about resources. The FBI's core mission is to counter terrorism, espionage, and major criminal threats. Now, recent large-scale reassignments to immigration enforcement or politically motivated investigations cause me concerns that other critical missions are being neglected. One example, in March of this year, you created a Tesla-related task force and diverted personnel from the domestic terrorism operations section to work on that task force. What risk analysis justified that decision, and do you still consider domestic violent terrorism to be a lower priority?
Any form of terrorism, domestic or international, is the highest priority at the FBI. And
But
when
why
you say,
divert resources away from those missions?
I don't believe that's accurate. We did not divert resources away. When cars were exploding and people were being set on fire, I directed resources to address it.
Well, then I'll suggest in your follow-up, and we can make this more explicit in our questions for the record, that you provide the accurate information about the diversion of resources. Because, again, when I understand that you authorize large-scale agent reassignments from counterintelligence and cybercrime to not just immigration cases, but others, it has an impact on the other priorities like nation-state threats and ransomware investigations. Moving on to a different subject area. Safeguarding our elections is a core FBI responsibility. The public needs confidence that election security work is driven by facts and free from political influence. Mr. Director, do you agree with Attorney General Bondi's decision to disband the FBI Foreign Influence Task Force?
The disbanding of that task force did not in any way reallocate or take away resources from that critical mission set.
So then how are you mitigating the risk of foreign actors interfering in U.S. elections heading in?
As I've highlighted through our cyber programs, which have seen a 40, 50, 60% increase in arrests for cyber threat actors looking to not just harm our critical infrastructure systems, but also interfere in our elections. We've had multiple arrests this year of individuals who are interfering in that process.
Did the Department of Justice's Election Integrity Task Force seek statewide voter lists and driver's license data?
I can't speak for the Department of Justice.
You're a member of the Department of Justice.
I can
Did
speak
the
for the
FBI play a role in those requests?
Whatever request that we had pursuant to the department's direction were provided.
So then you can speak
for the
to
FBI.
Those actions.
For the FBI.
So you can speak to those actions.
For the FBI.
So what role did you play in those requests?
Whatever requests we get from the department, I don't have those details in front of me. We provide whatever requests they have.
I have not many details in front of you on a lot of the questions coming from this side of the aisle. So I do hope that there are substantive and accurate responses to our questions in writing. In my time left, Mr. Chairman, I just want to call out a couple of observations. The director before us has tried to explain, I won't say explain, tried to explain how he doesn't need another $500 million to do the job. And specifically that even if the FBI had an additional $500 million, it would take years. I think he referenced 14 years to fill the vacancies. But in the meantime, relying on partnership with local law enforcement to fulfill the mission of the Bureau. As we've discussed in other hearings and in other committees, by the way, given this immigration mass deportation agenda of the administration, the FBI is not the only one leaning on local law enforcement to do the job. ICE has made it clear that they're doing the same. Other law enforcement agencies within DHS is doing the same. So much so that ICE's recruitment, because they're not only not advocating for cuts, they're actually requesting additional dollars and have issues about policy with them. But if ICE's plan to do the job is not just hiring up significantly. They don't seem to have that as a concern, but the FBI does. Both ICE and the FBI are citing partnerships with local law enforcement, which, look, partnership and engagement is great. But having come from local law enforcement at the outset of my public service career, I also know that capacity and resources at the local level are strained, particularly in times like this. And when ICE is going on a hiring spree, and you have local law enforcement agencies worried about their ability to recruit and retain local law enforcement officers and not losing them to the federal government, then our reliance on those local law enforcement agencies is a perilous strategy to take and could undermine local law enforcement's ability to address crime at the local level, whether it's white-collar crime, organized retail theft, violent crime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in my final minute, I will also suggest this. Director Patel has referenced earlier in the hearing that one of the most significant value addeds of partnering with local law enforcement is that they are the best intelligent source. Is that correct?
For on the ground.
Yet, when local law enforcement is put in a perilous position of being in a role with this mass deportation agenda, which is consistently overreached, has been found to violate the law and the Constitution, and has undermined public confidence in law enforcement, not just by immigrants, by the way, but especially immigrants. When immigrants are victims of crime and are afraid to come forward because they don't know what law enforcement is going to do with their information or not, when immigrants, legal or undocumented, are witnesses to crime and are afraid to come forward with that information because they don't know what's going to happen with their information or not. That undermines the credibility of law enforcement with the community and undermines the intelligence, Director Patel, that you say are the best source of intelligence when it comes to law enforcement. So it's shaky, it's worrisome, and in my opinion, overall, you are failing to live up to the role and responsibility that you have been confirmed to, and I associate with myself with everything Senator Booker said earlier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, before we go to Senator Blackburn, without objection, I want to introduce into the record a recently declassified document thanks to Director Patel. The document is a Director Ray FBI analysis of Nellie Orr's false statements to the Congress. Orr never suffered consequences for advancing the phony Trump-Russia narrative and attempting to cover up her involvement in the hoax with false statements. Yet time and again, the American justice system has been weaponized against President Trump and his associates, such as Peter Navarro, with reckless abandon. The DOJ's inaction on Nellie Orr's criminal referral, despite the obvious incriminating evidence provided in the FBI's own analysis, undermines public trust in the rule of law thanks to Director Ray's utter failure. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple follow-up questions for Ms. Giovanoli before I ask about post-release services. So let's put a pin in that. I'll come back to that in a minute here. But want to afford you an opportunity to further respond to a couple of issues that have come up previously by some of my colleagues. Number one, the value and importance of access to counsel for unaccompanied children, number one. Number two, anything further to add on this? As we recognize an unwillingness or reluctance sometimes on the part of a parent or a sponsor to engage in this process, generally, but also what that means for the accuracy and value of underlying data as a result. I mean, the one example you kept pointing to is like, just because the first call doesn't get answered doesn't mean that a second or third call may not. There's a lot more to it than that. And third, just from a governance and oversight standpoint, the distinction between an ombudsperson and an inspector general. pluses and minuses in the value of an ombuds office as no longer exists. I know those are three big ones before I get to my post-release services question. In any particular order.
Those are three big ones. Let me work backwards. The Ombuds Office still has staff. We have a deputy, but it has been seriously curtailed by the HHS administration, and it is not allowed to do the kind of oversight, the kind of visits, the kind of investigations that we had envisioned. I think that's critical. Anyone that is calling on, more investigation into when things go wrong should recognize that accountability starts at that basic level of an ombuds office that can pick up the questions when they first come up, whatever they are. And in fact, even though I was in the Trump administration for the first month at least, not once was I ever invited or asked to participate in any of the meetings that were taking place about the new vetting or any of these other programs. So I have no idea what was actually going on in that room, but it wasn't transparent.
Well, and pardon the interruption here, but does the apparent change in mission or priority combined with a reduction in resource help or hurt the cause of addressing the concern of unaccompanied children?
Oh, it hurts it, of course. Of course. You asked me several questions, and I got so riled up on that last one that I've now forgotten.
Access to counsel, importance, value of access to counsel, or reduced access to counsel for unaccompanied children?
Well, I think that one of the unfortunate things about the discussion so far today has been that we have focused so much on the very tragic situations, which should never happen. No child should be subject to this kind of harm and abuse ever. But we neglect to mention that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of children who have become thriving, successful young adults because they were given the opportunity to be protected in the United States. I used to work at Kids in Need of Defense, a legal services organization that represented thousands of children over the years who are now contributing to the United States in wonderful ways. And that in and of itself should identify the importance of having representation. As Senator Hirono says, there is a higher likelihood that a child will receive some type of protection in the United States because there is an attorney. And that's because immigration law is so incredibly complicated. And asylum and trafficking protections and all the different kinds of things that a child might be eligible for are extremely complex, difficult things to do that a child on their own simply can't. They don't know the legal standard, let alone have the probably the developmental ability to be able to articulate everything that's happened to them without guidance.
Thank you. And the third was the any further comment on the willingness versus reluctance of a parent or a sponsor to field a phone call or otherwise?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It is. There's no question that the more that ICE becomes the face of child protection in the United States, the more it is that parents and sponsors are going to be reluctant to participate. And I should note that the Inspector General's report that listed the 291,000 NTAs that ICE did not issue, it was not a report that was talking about HHS. It was talking about ICE failures to communicate with HHS. It was talking about ICE failures to not follow up, even though the Biden administration's legal advisor for ICE had set up a protocol for looking for children, say, who had not appeared in court. So there are many, as I used to tell my staff, there's never two sides to a story. There's 5 or 6 or 7, and I'm afraid that we've really only seen maybe 1.5 sides today.
Thank you for that. And now finally, my post-release services question. I do have additional ones. I'm mindful of the time of day. I can submit some for questions for the record. But on this point, which I think is important to cover today, before an unaccompanied child is placed with a sponsor, the Office of Refugees Resettlement, ORR, must at a minimum determine that the sponsor is, quote, capable of providing for the child's physical and mental well-being.
Yes.
Once placed, OR's post-release services can be crucial in ensuring the well-being of unaccompanied children as they integrate into communities. So my question is, in an ideal world, should all children receive post-release services, and how do these services work in conjunction with the vetting that happened prior to the placement to protect children from exploitation or trafficking?
Yes, in an ideal world, they should receive those kinds of services. Post-release services provide opportunities to help with adjustment to the community. So enrolling in school, identifying mental or physical health issues that may not have been apparent or developed after the fact. Many of these children, as everyone has said, have suffered some serious trauma. Some of them are victims of trafficking. Some of those things do not emerge in the time that they're in custody. It's only when they meet with someone that they trust that they start to tell their real stories.
Thank you.
The grand jury report that Senator Moody was referring to, dated March the 30th, 2023, will be made part of the record without objection. So the record will stay open for 1 week for members to submit additional questions, so you may be hearing from members of the committee, and we'd appreciate your attention to those and prompt response if you do get those. And with that, thank you for being here.
Mr. Chair, if I may, for
Sure.
closing, just a few thoughts and remarks. First, would move to enter into a number of statements into the record, including a statement from Kids in Need of Defense, a statement from the Acacia Center for Justice, a statement from the American Pediatric Association, and a statement from the American Psychological Association of Services. And I just want to thank the witnesses for your time and your participation today. I think we should all agree that we want to ensure the safety and well-being of unaccompanied children just as a human concern, while we struggle to modernize our immigration system as a whole. It saddens me that we have not made the progress in the last 8 months, the last 4 years, et cetera, that we should have. But we have an obligation to put aside some political theater and conduct true oversight of the disturbing allegations sent to us by whistleblowers. Not just to look back to the prior administration, let's look at what's happening as we speak. We have an obligation, therefore, to also ask the Trump administration tough questions and demand transparency. We need to do more to ensure that children are not needlessly separated from their parents. We need to do better to account for parents or sponsors' sometimes reluctance or fear of participating in the process in a dynamic that Senator Durbin articulated. I do believe it is possible. In fact, it's imperative that we balance being protective without keeping kids in custody for overly extended periods of time, which does tend to cause them harm as well. It's a delicate balance, but a necessary balance. And at the very least, we need to make sure that these children have access to the services and the support that they need, including access to counsel, as Senator Hirono has championed, along with the post-release services that we just discussed, all in an effort to keep them safe, even when they are released to vetted sponsors. After all, these are children. They are minors, in some cases preschoolers, not unlike those being portrayed in the chart behind me, that the administration is currently forcing to go into immigration court alone. So, Mr. Chair, I again ask that you join me in calling for that accountability. We are the Committee of Jurisdiction, so let's hold an oversight hearing. Let's go to one of these shelters and see what's really happening to children currently and what conditions they're being held on today. And last, a comment or response to a comment that I heard earlier about the worst among us. As you've heard me say repeatedly, Mr. Chairman, all year long, if this administration was truly only targeting the quote-unquote worst among us, the dangerous, violent criminals that they like to talk about so very often, there would be no debate, there would be no discussion. But ICE's data, the Department of Homeland Security's data, has shown what we have believed all along. The vast majority of people being detained, being arrested, many being deported even without due process, are not the dangerous, violent criminals, the convicted criminals that they speak of. There are people who happen to be undocumented for a number of reasons. Maybe they were here initially lawfully because of TPS, and that has been taken away from them by this president. Maybe they came initially lawfully on a visa of some sort and have overstayed that visa. That doesn't mean that they came here unlawfully, but they now find themselves in that category. And yes, some that did come unlawfully but have no criminal convictions on their record, but many work in industries that our federal government deems essential, whether it's in construction, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in hospitality or healthcare or otherwise. They deserve better than to live in fear of deportation. They are not the dangerous, violent criminals that this administration likes to talk about. That is the reality of the times that we're living in. We can and must do better, and this is the committee of jurisdiction. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, to tackle these problems with serious, constructive engagement, and I thank you for the hearing today.
Padilla.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in this hearing today, which is our, at minimum, annual opportunity to ask questions as we fulfill our obligation to provide accountability over the Department of Justice. So just sort of to level set a little bit for folks in the audience and for folks watching at home, the Department of Justice is supposed to be the nation's guardian of fairness and the rule of law. The power of the Department of Justice is built on public trust and a belief that prosecutions are based on facts and law, not on politics or personal loyalty. And I call that out, Mr. Chairman, because when that breaks down, when the public trust breaks down, then justice itself is at risk. But under this Trump administration and the leadership of Attorney General Bondi, I believe the independence of the Department of Justice has come under attack. The department has been reorganized, it's been realigned, and repurposed in ways that we've never seen before. Important offices have been closed, key programs dismantled, and agents diverted, all without congressional authorization or transparent justification. Now, these are not minor bureaucratic changes. They represent a fundamental shift in the Department of Justice's missions and priorities, its policies, and its practices. Now, for example, career prosecutors have been pressured to change decisions in politically sensitive cases. Ethics oversight has been taken away from independent career professionals and handed to political appointees with little experience in these matters. Internal working groups have been created to revisit investigations involving President Trump and his allies. And together, these steps send a dangerous message that prosecutorial decisions can be driven by political loyalty instead of the law. Now, even more troubling is that the Department of Justice has pulled resources away from organized crime, away from counterterrorism, away from the protection of civil rights, to focus on immigration enforcement. The American people expect a Department of Justice to pursue violent crime, as do I, to pursue corruption and threats to national security, not to serve as an arm of immigration policy, and in so doing, under-resource other critical missions. Now, the Justice Department's credibility depends on the public's faith in justice, and that the justice will be applied equally to every person and not reserved for the powerful or the connected. And that faith must be protected. And so it's in that spirit that this committee has a duty to ensure the department's work remains lawful, remains transparent, and remains true to its highest duty, the fair and impartial administration of justice. Now, that being said, I do want to get into some specific items with Attorney General Bondi here, beginning with the firing of Michelle Beckwith. Michelle Beckwith was a 15-year career prosecutor with the Department of Justice. She prosecuted in her career some of the worst in my home state of California: sex traffickers, transnational terrorists, those who this administration claims to care about and be targeting, prioritizing in taking them off the streets. And it may surprise some to learn that Ms. Beckwith was unceremoniously marched out of her office and fired from her job in July of this year. Why? Not because she failed to do her job, quite the opposite. It was because she had the audacity to remind Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bovino that he was obligated to follow a court order and the Constitution in California. According to reports, she was fired less than 6 hours after she told Bovino he couldn't arrest people without probable cause. 6 hours. So my first question, Attorney General Bondi, is a simple yes-no question. Do you believe that government officials like Gregory Bovino are obligated to follow applicable court orders, whether they agree with them or not, yes or no?
First, Senator Padilla, you have gone on for over 5 minutes, and I wish that you loved your state of California as much as you hate President Trump. We'd be in really good shape then, because violent crime in California is currently 35% higher than the national average. Property crime in California is 18% higher than the national average. That should be something that we should be talking about and working together on, yet we're not. And no, this is important. You're talking about all of my agencies, and I want to let you know what DEA has been doing, and they are working hand in hand with
I
Homeland
appreciate
Security.
that, and I'm going
No,
to
you can't go on for 5 minutes and criticize my agents who are out working without pay right now because you voted to shut down the government. They're out there working without pay.
Mr. Chairman, I asked a simple yes or no question. Attorney General Bondi is refusing
4,500
to respond.
kilos
So let
of
me move on to
fentanyl
the
and
next
50 million
topic,
fentanyl pills
because
off the streets.
While under your watch,
FBI,
prosecutors
23,000 violent criminals. U.S. Marshals,
Mr. Chairman, order, please.
51,000 fugitives.
I'm not getting an answer to my question. I'm trying to move on to the next question or the next topic. Mr. Chairman, order, please. Thank you. Because under Attorney General Bondi's watch, career prosecutors are being fired for telling agencies to follow the law and uphold the Constitution. Meanwhile, there are instances of allies of the president who seem to be getting let off the hook. I won't reiterate what some of my colleagues have already brought up in terms of the dismissal of the investigation into Tom Homan and his alleged acceptance of $50,000 as payment by undercover FBI agents posing as business executives looking to secure contracts with a future Trump administration. Because if the reports are true, it's not just the underlying conduct of Mr. Homan, which would be absolutely unacceptable, but the dismissal of the investigation charges raises concerns about the influence of the White House on the Department of Justice. Again, a simple question, and I'd appreciate a simple and brief answer. Whose decision was it to end this investigation?
I have answered that question multiple times, yet you didn't have the courtesy to be sitting in here for the hearing. I'm not going to answer it again. And I find it interesting that you want order in this proceeding now. Excuse me, Senator.
Then
you want order in this proceeding now.
Mr. Chairman, order,
you sure
please.
didn't have order when you stormed Secretary Nome at a press conference in California, did you?
I will ask a follow-up question. Would you commit to either releasing the tape or at least making it available for members of this committee to review, yes or no?
Senator, you have not been sitting in here this entire hearing. I've answered the question, and I also want to tell you that our ATF agents had seized 25,000 illegal firearms.
So we will try again and move on to a different
In your
topic.
home state, we are prosecuting
Chairman,
illegal
order,
aliens
please.
who have raped
Mr. Chairman,
and murdered young
order,
girls.
please. Thank you. So when I haven't been in this hearing, I've been watching from my office, monitoring the entire hearing, just so everybody is aware. But since I'm not getting answers to my questions, I'll try to ask one last subject area. Now, again, there's been increasing concerns about the politicized decision-making and the erosion of internal safeguards that protect prosecutorial independence. Before we even get into the integrity and independence of prosecutions, we get into, you have to ask the question about the independence and integrity of investigations themselves. The director of the FBI, Director Patel, was here before us just a few weeks ago. Attorney General Bondi, you are the Attorney General of the United States. Director Patel reports to you. Do you believe he's doing a good job, yes or no?
I believe Director Patel is doing a great job. You know where he is right now, Senator Padilla? Right now, you asked me a question.
Yes,
Director
I know
Patel
where he
right
is,
now
and I know
is
where
in
he's headed
Chicago,
because you said
Senator
it earlier
Durbin,
in the hearing.
fighting to keep
You've said it
Chicago
earlier in the hearing, and yes, I have been paying attention.
You know, you want order in here now, yet you stormed the Director of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. You sure didn't have order that day, did you, Senator?
Attorney General, you are under oath. I did not storm the secretary, the video.
Oh, that was
makes
on
very
video. That
clear.
video's been released, I believe, very public.
Mr. Chairman, recent actions raise serious concerns about Director Patel's judgment and politicization, including lawsuits from former FBI officials alleging retaliatory firings and his decision to cut off longstanding partnerships with civil rights organizations and his decision to fire an FBI agent for refusing to engage in a, quote, perp walk of James Comey. And on top of all that, his prematurely claiming that subjects were in custody after the shooting of Charlie Kirk. I take Attorney General Bondi's endorsement today of his work as her support for those actions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May I respond, Senator Chairman?
Yes.
Under Director Patel, 23,000 violent criminals have been arrested, a 91% increase over last year. More than 1,500 child predators have been arrested. We are making cases in your jurisdiction constantly in California, and I wish you would care about those cases. We have disrupted 1,600 gangs and criminal enterprises, 1,600 gangs within this country, thanks to Director Patel and the great men and women of the FBI.
Senator Schmidt. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How are you today, Attorney General? It's good to see you.
Have a rough voice.
I have to say, I am struck by...
Chairman, I just want to join all of my colleagues in the stance that political violence is never acceptable. It should be denounced at every turn, regardless of where it comes from. We've seen what happens when violence becomes a political tool. It's not protests. It becomes an attack on our very democracy itself, and it strikes at the principle that political change in this country should happen through healthy, rigorous debate and at the ballot box, not through fear or intimidation. And while political violence is rare, its impact is profound. Now, I want to ask a question specifically in the context of threats and intimidation that becomes aimed at public officials, and those are more than just personal attacks. They're attempts to make people too afraid to serve. We've seen that danger spread not just from members of Congress and state officials, local elected officials, but to judges and election workers now too. Now, protecting those who uphold our democratic system should not be controversial. Mr. Braniff, what does current research show about the surge in threats to members of Congress since 2017, and how can Congress strengthen threat assessment capacity without chilling legitimate speech?
Thank you, Senator. Individuals who wind up fixating on elected officials or the integrity of our election system are clearly espousing anti-democratic sentiment, right? And often those are observable, right? These individuals leak their intent or express things that others can pick up on. So in other contexts, 80% of school shooters leak their intent. About 50% of mass casualty attackers leak their intent. Right, so there's often these indications that someone is starting to self-medicate on the idea of violence. And that's an opportunity to do an intervention. And unfortunately, the U.S. Secret Service is, of course, an exceptional organization when it comes to behavioral threat assessment and management. There are other entities in the U.S. government that still train behavioral threat assessment and management. This is becoming a normal practice across the country. Some states have mandates for behavioral threat assessment and management, but we really need to invest in nationalizing these programs. I don't mean in having one national program, I mean having them scale nationally, ensuring that those individuals are trained, that those programs are resourced so they can operate with fidelity. But there's a really important opportunity to do non-punitive interventions for individuals before they get to the point of criminality, but have a handoff mechanism there in case they have crossed that criminal threshold so that we can maintain, ensure our democracy remains intact and these individuals receive accountability if that's what the situation calls for.
Right, thank you. And just as a follow-up, two follow-ups if you don't mind. One, we've seen doxing of federal judges and attacks on elected officials. Which protective measures have proven most effective at deterring or preventing these types of threats?
Senator, I don't know that I have a great answer on the prevention of doxing. We live in a very online world. There's a lot of information available for all of us. We can all do the best we can to protect our personal information. I think that at the end of the day, a lot of what we've been talking about is important, and that are norms. What are the norms that we allow for that we think are acceptable in our nation, in our community, in our household, among our friends? Norms actually really do matter. Norms and culture shape behaviors. And we right now are really struggling with the power that the online world gives us without a lot of norms that work against our worst impulses.
Thank you. And one question for Mr. Hodges, and again, appreciate your service and all you've been through and your willingness to be here today. Based on your experience, Mr. Hodges, what operational or resource gaps must be addressed to safeguard democratic processes and better protect public servants?
That's an excellent question. I'm just a regular old patrol officer. I'm not in the meetings of management. I don't have the bird's eye view. I don't know. I don't know what resources we can dedicate to stemming this problem. I believe the other witness here had a great point earlier about intervention. I had never heard of that before from a scholarly point of view, and that sounded very promising. I think that we should look towards funding that if it gets the results that he spoke of.
Right. Thank you. And I know my time is up, Mr. Chairman. I just offer and invite in closing that we as members of the committee, members of the Senate, as an entire body, can do a whole lot of good by leading by example.
Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for calling this hearing on such an important topic. Sadly, it's very, very timely. Mr. Braniff, can I just start with you? Actually, just want to follow up on something you were just saying to Senator Padilla. So I wasn't quite clear from your answer to him. You're anti-doxing or pro-doxing?